feel like Julie Gillard. Thanks very much, Ian, and thank you very much, Ian, for what you're doing for the food producers. You're a real little ripper, you really are, and it won't be forgotten. And also I'd like to welcome Chris Dawson from the Lord Monckton Foundation, and also Lord Monckton, and what a fantastic job you're doing to tell people about the truth behind climate change, and you've got the facts and you've got the data. I'd also like to thank you, the taxpayers of this state, for coming here today and giving up your precious resources to be here. I'd just like to start off with asking you all a question. Who would rather eat a clean, pristine food product grown here in Australia rather than eat food that's coming from overseas? So would you rather eat food that's grown here in Australia? Well, we need your help, because we're not going to be able to do it, because we're about 10 years off of being net food importers, believe me, with the restrictions that's being put on us farmers with this Natural Resource Management Board is absolutely ridiculous. But I just want to tell you how I got involved. I went to a Natural Resource Management meeting in 2010, November, at Victor Harbour, and I listened to the jargon that went on, and after about an hour there were 7 of these NRM and Department of Water sitting out the front, and I asked who owned the water that comes out the sky, and it was deadly silence. And I thought, we've got a bit of a problem here. Then I asked them again, no answer. And the third time I said, well, surely you can tell the people here tonight who owns the water. And this guy stood up and he said, the Crown. And I said, well, if the Crown owns the water, we're going to have to bill you for the storage of your so-called water. We own our infrastructure, we own our bores, we own our dams. And another guy stood up and said, there's a court system, mate. And that really stirred things up. So from there, FLAG SA was formed, Food Producers Landowners Action Group South Australia, and now we've become FLAG Australia Incorporated. We've got members from all over Australia. But I just want to take you back 30 years. And let's say that I was here telling you 30 years ago that our manufacturing and our industry would be gone. You'd think this guy's a lunatic. Have a look where we are today. Have a look where our manufacturing and industry is today. It's just about gone. And believe me, we will be net food importers within 10 years if this environmental movement is not stopped. And you've got to realise, us farmers are not eco-vandals. We're not ruining the environment, because it's the way we earn our living. We have to look after it. I had a phone call from a 74-year-old woman a couple of months ago who was absolutely beside herself, saying that she got a letter to say that they've guesstimated the size of her dam. So I went and seen her, and they guessed this dam at 10.16 meg. So FLAG Australia and the Honourable Anne Bresington, who helped fund with their own money, we got a water surveyor in, and he did the actual measurement, and that measurement come in at just over 6 meg. 1 million gallons, and I'm sorry I'm in gallons, I'm from the old school, 1 million gallons difference. So they are guessing with our livelihoods. So you imagine if you get your bank statement and you have a look at it and you're a couple of thousand short, and you go into the bank and you see the bank manager and say, listen mate, I'm a couple of thousand short here, and he says, don't worry about it, we're only guessing. The NRM want to fence off our creeks and fence off our dams, all at our expense. Why? Because they talk about pristine water. And it's quite obvious they don't want animal faeces going into the waterways. Well, microorganisms feed off animal faeces. It's part of the ecology. We've got the Kangaroo Creek, the most pristine water in the state. Cattle and sheep have been drinking out of there for 100 years or more. And all this fencing off of creeks and our dams, can you imagine the noxious weeds, the vermin? How are we going to get rid of these noxious weeds? We're going to have to spray chemicals. Quite all right for the chemicals to go in the waterways. And then we've got to have a trough system, all at our expense. So when I jump on my motorbike and go around my paddocks and I see all the kangaroos and everything else drinking out of the troughs, that when we're on a metered system that we're going to pay for, we're not going to be able to survive. I don't mind the kangaroos coming to my dam. I've got 2 creeks at home. Come there, have a drink, no problems there at all. And then they want to tell us our stocking rates. And what I'm telling you today is actually happened to people. This is not hearsay. And they've been onto a property at the Mallee and they've said to the guy he's got to get rid of a certain number of sheep because he was above the stocking rate for that area. And he said, no, look, hang on. I've got plenty of feed. My sheep are in good condition. No, sorry, they've got to go. They were counting lambs as full-grown ewes. This is ridiculous. And then he said, well, if I don't get rid of them, you're probably going to charge me some non-complying fines, are you? No, we'll sell you up. How ridiculous to think we're going through that in this flaming country. And we go on, and I can tell you another story, a guy at Mount Compass. And just remember that stock and domestic water are supposed to be exempt, no charge. And this gentleman had to put a meter on his bore. And this guy from the Department of Water stood over him, and this guy is 73, and said to him, that's where the meter will go. All, just bear in mind, at his expense. And he said, no, look, hang on, stock and domestic are exempt. No, it's got to go there. So they forced him to put the meter where the stock and domestic water are going through. Another guy at Victor Harbour Way was clearing a bit of silt out of a creek to help environmental flow. He got hit with a $35,000 fine, or he's got to plant 6,000 square metres of this Acacia paradoxa, prickly acacia, kerosene bush, and all this other native grass and low bushes. And I've got a letter here from the NRM office at Wollonga. And this is a beauty. They're supposed to be about our native animals. Just bear with us. Some clusters of Acacia paradoxa will protect the riverbanks from kangaroo intrusion. So they don't even want the kangaroo getting a drink. Unbelievable. And that brings me on to another thing with this native vegetation. And you hear, all of a sudden, we see all these bushfires and they say, oh, climate change. No, climate change doesn't start bushfires. Lightning does. Lunatics do. All this native vegetation that's being planted around, we will get more and more bushfires. They'll be wildfires. Let's have sensible planting. I noticed coming into Adelaide today, I said to a mate, have a look at all this stuff that's being planted around the parks now. It's 6 inches apart, 12 inches apart. If they're really concerned about their native animals and their endangered species, they would have sensible plantings. This is just going to wipe them out. And plus the stock losses and the human life that's threatened and all people's valuables. Just excuse me a minute. Also, the NRM coming onto our properties. A farmer rang me, food producer, and he was pretty upset. He was milking his cows and he looked out in the front paddock on his creek and there was 13 people on his creek. How would you like it if I grabbed 12 people and come around to your place and roamed around? What about the occupational health and safety issues with bulls in a paddock or cows protecting their calves? What about the spreading of disease? I'm Yoni's free on my property. I've got a beef cattle stud. I'm a MN2 status. And I only need a thumbnail of manure in my paddocks from a non-assessed property and my stud could be ruined. All my hard work down the gurgler. So I can tell you now, we're not too happy with what's going on. The NRM, the Natural Resource Management Board, has been allocated $133.2 million from 2009 to 2014 to send us food producers to the wall. And believe me, that's what they're trying to do. 350 offices, NRM offices, Natural Resource Management offices, opening up all over the state. Yet we've got hospitals, schools closing down. In my town, Strathalbyn, it's about the fastest growing town in the state, mind you. Our police station is open from 9 in the morning till 11, 2 hours. Absolutely ridiculous. The NRM meetings that we went to, you talk about freedom of speech. Sorry, that's gone. They did not want us speaking publicly. I will see you individually. Quite, well, come and see you. When I put up my hand these days, well, sorry, I don't get a word in. And another thing that worries me too is with all this vegetation that's being planted, taxpayers' money, they have a prescribed burn-off. Prescribed burn-off. Murdering these native animals and endangered species. No different to me going out in the paddock, lighting my paddock up and burning my cattle. Politicians talk about border security. I can tell you now, if we become net food importers, and believe me, as I said earlier on, we're very close, 10 years at the most. Victoria last year imported more food than it exported. That is disgusting. But getting back to about the border security, what about food security? If we become net food importers, we're going to be relying on other countries to supply us with food. What if they cut the supply? And believe me, it could happen. I think our future generations deserve the privilege what we've had in our lifetime. They deserve the right to have a clean, pristine food product so they can enjoy it for the rest of their lives. And I can tell you right now, I won't go to my grave without a hell of a fight. Another thing, when I see stations that are being bought up with taxpayers' money, cattle and sheep are removed, and these stations, national parks, noxious weed and vermin going wild. Surely, if the food producer wants to sell, we've got enough young people out here that are quite capable to manage these stations and keep the food chain going. I think when you look at the Natural Resource Management Act of 2004, this really worries me. Section 69, seize our financial documents, take away our right to remain silent, self-incrimination. So you can't get a lawyer, we want your financial documents. These days, grab your computer, take the lot. Section 127(6)A, $35,000 fine for non-complying for an individual, that this government wanted to change to $700,000. And if you're a family company, it is currently $70,000, and this good old government wanted to change it to $2.2 million. I think you people really need to know what's going on. We are for the environment, believe me, and I don't care whether you're environmentalist or what you are. Surely you want to eat a clean, pristine food product grown here, not just for healthy food, but for our safety. So in conclusion, I would just like to thank the Honourable Anne Bressington. You've been fantastic, Anne, what you're doing behind closed doors and putting up the money to help Flag Australia do an accurate measurement on those dams. And also Lord Monckton, travelling the world, giving up your precious time, I think, just to let people know the other side. And you've got the facts and you've got the data. So all I'll say is thank you very much.